Hey everybody, this is Unit 5 Formative 1, Day 3 video. We're going to be factoring, except now we're going to be pulling out a greatest common factor first. Okay, so just to remember, greatest common factor is when we find a number that all the terms have in common. So in this case, 2x squared and a 4x and a negative 6 all had a 2 in common, so we pulled that out. And when we did that, then 2x squared divided by 2 gave us x squared, 4x divided by 2 gave us 2x, and negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So you ended up with this when you ended up factoring. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do for number 1 here is pull out a greatest common factor, or look for a greatest common factor. So you're going to have to do this from now on with every problem and see if there's a greatest common factor. So is there anything we can take out of a 10, a 64, and a 24? We obviously can't take a W out of all of them because the 24 doesn't have a W. But all three of these numbers divide by 2, so we can pull a 2 out of everything. When we do that, we're left with 5w squared minus 32w plus 12. Okay, and now for the rest of the problem, we're actually going to ignore the 2 on the outside. Okay, we're going to have that in our final answer, except it's going to be on the outside of both of those parentheses. Okay, so we just carry that 2 all the way down to the outside of our final answer. So our final answer is still going to have those 2 parentheses. And now we work the problem the same way we would, except, like I said, we're going to ignore this 2 for solving or factoring out the rest of the problem. So we're going to take 5 times 12, that gives me 60. And I'm going to find some factors of 60 that are going to equal negative 32. Well, 30 times 2 gives me 60, and negative 30 and negative 2 also gives me 60. Okay, since I'm trying to equal a negative 32, I'm going to need to use the negative 30 and negative 2 to get to negative 32. All right, filling in my brackets here, I want to get to 5w, so that means 5w times w will give me 5w squared. We're going to do the minus 2 in this parentheses, and then what times 5 will give me negative 30? Well, negative 6. So we're going to say minus 6 in this parentheses. And here is your answer. We can double check it by saying negative 2 times w is negative 2w, and 5w times negative 6 is negative 30w. Those two added together equals the negative 32w, which is what you wanted. All right, here's another one. Again, let's look for a greatest common factor between negative 8x squared, 40x squared, and negative 24. Well, yes, they all divide by 2, but there's something bigger that goes into all of those. They actually are all going to divide by a negative 8. So we're going to pull a negative 8 out. Again, remember when this first term is negative here, we're going to pull out a negative for our greatest common factor. So when we do that, then we're left with x squared minus 5x, because 40 divided by negative 8 is negative 5, and then negative 24 divided by negative 8 is a positive 3. So now we just need to factor out what's in the parentheses there, and we know that our final answer will have a negative 8 on the outside. Okay, so x times x gives you x squared. And then we want to find factors of 3 that are going to add up to negative 5. So we use 3 and 1, and we know that 3 plus 1 is not going to equal negative 5. We can use negative 3 and negative 1. That's not going to equal negative 5. The only factors of negative 3 or of 3 are those 2. So this is actually as far as we can factor this one. So this, in this case, would actually be your answer, and we don't have to do any of this. Okay? So if you were left with, let's say you were just given this problem here instead of any of this. If you were just given this, you obviously can't factor it at all, so we would actually call that prime. But in this case, we can factor it. We factored out a negative 8. Okay, and the last one here, 9, 3, and negative 30. We can pull a 3 out of all of them. So we're going to pull a 3 out, so we're left with 3r squared, because 9 divided by 3 is 3, plus 3r divided by 3 gives you 1r, negative 30 divided by 3 gives you minus 10. Okay, so now we're going to factor this out. We know a 3 has to go on the outside. We know that 3r times r gives you 3r squared. Now we just need to figure out what else goes in there. 3 times negative 10 gives you negative 30. Some factors of negative 30. One has to be positive, one has to be negative. So we could use 30 and negative 1. That adds up to 29. Not what we want. We're looking for 1r. We could use 6 and negative 5. And that actually adds up to 1. So we could use those two. We're going to put the minus 5 here because nothing times 3 will give us negative 5. But 3 times a positive 2 will give us the 6. So we're going to put a positive 2 there. That gives me negative 5r and 6r. And sure enough, those add up to 1r. So your answer would be this right here. All right, and that is how you factor pulling out a greatest common factor first. Like I said, it's pretty much the same thing we've been doing, except you have to look for that number to pull out first. So now from now on out, you need to look for a greatest common factor before you even start. All right, make sure you took good notes, and we will see you later.